Hello friends, and welcome to the second part of me drawing this background of the Planet Express building. And if you missed it, last week I did the ink layers using the screenshot as a guide. So do take a look at that if you missed it. But this week was about finishing the scene, colouring each layer and then adding the animation. And I used the screenshot as a guide for the colours, and to help I added a second drawing panel so I could zoom into both the reference and my drawing independently. So for all this video, it was just me creating a new palette entry for each level. I used the RGB colour picker to select the colour from the reference, and then used either the fill tool or the paintbrush tool to fill in the area. And then I did that for the next couple of hours. And again, like the ink stage, it took a lot longer than I expected, but it is a detailed picture, so I guess I just underestimated how long it would take. But the final outcome made it all worthwhile, even though this is only shown on screen in the first scene for a few seconds. But I hope to reuse this in later scenes, so hopefully it's a good investment. And it was also tempting to change the image some more, adding extra shadows or texture to some of the background, but I wanted to keep it as close to the original show as I could, so I resisted that temptation. And one thing I realised while painting this is that although I created a number of different levels for the purpose of the animation phase, it also gave me a bonus of separating the colours, because each Toonz raster level has its own palette. But where I had lots of colours, I made use of the folder option in the palette to separate the colours into sections, which made them more manageable. And putting this video together has made me think about future weeks in this project. Because I think some weeks I'll have something to say about the drawing or animation, but some will just be drawing, so I'll probably just show them as a speed paint, but we'll see. So the colouring phase took a while, and I'll leave that playing on screen, and if you notice I've added a timer bar at the bottom of the screen so you can see when this section comes to the end. Or you can jump straight to the animation section with the link in the description below. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Hi folks, I'm back. So that's the background all coloured in, and I've also made a few small changes by extending the street behind the buildings, which will help as I want to introduce some parallax to the scene. That is, I want to show some overlap as the camera moves, to make it feel more 3D like the original show. And I experimented a little with this in the animatic, but I'll need to be careful because all the buildings are shown connected to the street, and if I move any of those and not the street, they'll appear to slide. But I've got a small plan for that. So basically, I want the camera to zoom in on the Planet Express building, while the other side buildings move away and slightly go out of focus. And I want the distant buildings to not move much at all, and the clouds to slide across the sky. And to do that, I would like to use the 3D view in OpenToonz, but I've always had problems when zooming in for a scene like this, where I could never get the distant objects to sit totally still in the scene. They'd always zoom in a little, which isn't what I want, so I tend to move the columns separately and then parent them together to have similarly placed objects moving together. But I will use this 3D option at some point, just not today. But first I want to point something out. When I put the animatic together, you may remember that I included the animation in the scene, so when I imported the scene as a sub-xsheet, the animation was already set on the buildings, so I just had to extend the timing. So if I look inside this animatic here, you'll see these keys here are the animation where we zoom into the buildings, and that's where they end. And then stepping out, the only key here is the one that moves the animatic off the main drawing table, ready for this final animation. So because I intend to use the actual background scene for other external shots, I've not added any animation to the original background scene. Instead, I'll add it in here in this actual scene, so I can add different animation to the background pieces when I reuse them in another scene. So with that being said, let's re-import the background and set up this animation. So the first thing I need to do is to load the background as a sub-xsheet. So as always, we get the option to import or load. Now I could load it from the original location, but that means if I make changes to that original background, it'll affect the background in this scene. Or if I choose import, I'll take a snapshot copy today of the scene, and any changes I make will only be inside this scene. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll choose import to get a local copy. And of course, we've got the animatic here at the top, so if I play through that, all we'll see is a slight zoom of the buildings and the background staying the same. So we won't really make use of the animatic in this scene, apart from the timing, to know that it lasts for 98 frames. And I've already arranged for the zoom to start around frame 16. So I think the first thing I'll do is I'll zoom into the main background, because we don't need to see the animatic. I'll take the animatic out of the final animation by unticking the I button, and then we'll crack on. So first I want to zoom in into the main Planet Express building, but that should stay connected to the street, and the street is connected to the other buildings. So first, let's connect that together on the stage schematic. So I've got a room with my schematic in. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to step into the sub-xsheet for the actual background. And because we've got quite a few columns, I'll make this panel full screen, as I explained last week in my top 3 tips for making better use of the screen space. And now it'll be easier to organise these nodes. So the first thing I want to do is to move the nodes out of the way that I'm not going to use. So that's my reference image nodes, the guide nodes, and the animatic sub-xsheet, and this white background. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll connect the street to the Planet Express building. So when I add animation to the street using the animation tool, the building will move with it. The same for the left hand side building and the right hand side building, and for the layer that has some small foreground elements. And I'll leave the background columns because their animations aren't connected together. So let's just tidy that up, and then back to the main view. Okay, let's go to the xsheet view. So because I'd already set some scaling on some of the columns, you can see the size is slightly wrong here. But before we fix that, let's just extend all of these frames for the length of the animation. So again, we'll make the xsheet full screen. Let's unlock all of these columns so we can adjust them. By clicking unlock all, let's expose all the columns by clicking show all, so they're all visible. If we highlight them by clicking and dragging the handle down to frame 98, as that's the full length of this animation. Okay, so the reason that the buildings are quite small there is because all the drawings, if you remember from last week, have been made twice the size of the screen size to allow us to zoom in and not lose any fidelity. So the street is already set at 50% scale, as you can see here in the global scale column, but then so is the Planet Express building. So because they are attached, the building's already inherited the 50% scale, so we don't need the second 50% scale on the building. So the easiest way to remove that scale is just to delete the key, and then I'll adjust the position in a second. So I'll do the same for the other buildings here, and then let's place the elements in the correct place. So we'll step out of the sub-xsheet and take a look at the main animatic. We can see the animation starts on frame 16 and continues to frame 62. So we step back into there. On frame 16 is where we need to begin. So we've already got a key on frame 1 to position the street in the right place. So we need to duplicate that key on frame 16. So we could do that by clicking the key button here at the bottom of the screen. And the animation needs to end on frame 62. So we'll move to frame 62 and apply the zoom and any movement necessary. So that didn't quite work for me because I'd like to add a parallax effect to these two side buildings on the left here and on the right to move them quicker than the centre building to add a parallax effect. I can't do that while you can see the building and the street connected at the same time, so I need to move the camera up so we can't see so much of the street at the bottom here, and then we can move the buildings out of the way. So I'll just remove those two keys that I've added. And then in the first frame I'll adjust the height to move the whole scene down a little bit, like that. So again, on frame 16, I'll add a key, and on 62, let's adjust this zoom again. Good. So now if we take a look at these two side buildings, because the right hand building is totally off screen, we can adjust that at the same time as the main street. So if I add a key at the start of the movement, and then by the end of the animation on frame 62, I can then move this building even further out of the way. And if we take a look at that, we then get to see the parallax effect of the building moving quicker in the foreground than the background is. So it adds a bit of a 3D effect to it. But let's move it even further. Let's take a look at the left hand building. And because we can see that connected to the ground, if I start the movement at the same time as the camera zoom, you'll see the building sliding off the screen. So let's wait until we can't see the building connected to the screen. And I'll add a key there, and again, by the final frame, that's already moved off screen. So let's just move that even more. And if we take a look at the animation, we'll see a little bit of parallax there as it's moving away. Let's add to that. And you can see that moving there. So you've probably already noticed that as we zoom into the building, you can see this background here behind the water is exposed because it's not large enough, and perhaps the building should move at the same time. So let's just fix that. So firstly, for the water, I could just extend the size of this to make it a larger rectangle, and that's that sorted. And the next thing is the buildings. So we'll place those in the right place, put them there, and as the camera zooms in, so frame 16, we want to add a key so it doesn't move between frames 1 and 16, and then from 16 through to 62, again we'll add a little bit of movement. And I'll add the play markers from 16 to 62, because then we can easily jump from the first to the last frame of the animation. So let's work out where do we want them to move to. Well, let's just experiment. First, let's move them down. And because we can see the water being exposed here behind the buildings, what I'll do is I'll go to the schematic and I'll connect the water to the back buildings. So as I move the back buildings, the water moves with it. And again, we've got this issue where the values in the animation key for the buildings is also being passed down to the water. So we'll delete the key on the water, and that looks okay. If we take a look at the first and then the last frames, you can see the buildings moving slightly as we zoom in, which again adds a little bit of a parallax effect. So as the building in the foreground comes closer, it covers up the buildings in the background, which almost looks like the camera is moving lower in the scene. So the final thing I wanted to move was the clouds. And I'd like them to move through the whole scene. So starting at frame 1, we've already got a key here, and then moving down to the final frame, frame 98, we want to move them to the left. So what we'll do is we'll lock the north-south position, unlock the east and west, so now we can only move the position left and right. So I'm not sure how quickly we want the clouds to move, but they don't want to go too quickly. So let's just move them a little bit like that and see how that looks. So I notice that the clouds seem to accelerate and decelerate, which we don't want them to do, because my default interpolation is set to ease in and ease out. So let's just use one of the new features in this version 1.4 of OpenToonz and right click on the line directly on the X sheet and change the animation interpolation to linear, so the clouds move at the same speed from the beginning through to the end of the animation, which makes them look more natural. Let's see how that looks. Good, I think I'm happy with that. So one last thing I think I'd like to change is to add a tiny bit of blur to the clouds, because they look a little bit too crisp, and to add some blur to this building at the right hand side, again to add to the feeling of depth. So we'll do that in the FX schematic. So we'll go to my schematic room, change to the FX view, here we are, and I can see the clouds here. So we'll right click, insert an effect, blur. And then if I select on there and change the value, I only want something small, so perhaps 5. And if I change to the effects view, so I can preview the effect, and you can see a slight blur around the edge. That'll probably do. And then for the building at the right hand side, again, I'll add another blur, and 45, the default, is far too blurred. But we also want to have this effect applied as we zoom in. So I'm thinking possibly on frame 16, as we first start to move, we want to start to apply the blur. Let's just try that. So we'll set a value to 0 on that frame, press the key button to create a key, and then down at frame 62 we want to set the final blur positions. So let's just try 15. Could be too much, let's try 10. I'd like quite a subtle feeling for that. Okay, let's take a look at that in the preview mode. And you know what? I think that's probably about it for now. Now I might come back and make some minor changes later, but I think that could be it for scene 1. So I'll just render that out, ready to be included in the final video. And next week I can start on scene 2. So if you're not already, do subscribe to follow along with that, and hit the bell to be notified when the video is released. But for now, that's scene 1 complete. And that's a guarantee.